Appamada and its programs are supported by your generosity, and your generosity and support makes such a difference. You can find a link for contributions on the website at appamada.org. Thank you.
So again, to those of you who have not heard my apologies before, I got up in the darkness this morning and stumbled around, and I had assembled my talk and put my computer and the book that I need to quote from and so on in a bag, which I then drove off without. So I've spent most of the last two sitting periods scribbling to try and reconstruct what I wanted to say. So it will be somewhat even more disjointed than my normal talks. I apologize for that. I want to talk about the tensions that I feel in a lot of those things I've learned about Buddhism, and some of those tensions are and why they are important in my practice. And I want to talk about this wonderful phrase that I was recently introduced to by Flint in his December 8th talk and elsewhere, called Endarkenment, and a book that I've been reading about that. And then finally, I want to talk about tears and what keeps our eyes from drying up. So I will start here. First of all, I'm grateful to Flint for introducing me to this book. It's called Vimalakirti and the Awakened Heart by Joan Sutherland Roshi. And I would have known about this before, I know, if I had taken Flint's course about Vimalakirti or the course that Laurie taught several years ago about Vimalakirti. But a wonderful book, very poetic, and unlocks a lot of stuff that I had resisted before. She talks about the concept of endarkenment and explains how that is illustrated by the story of Vimalakirti, the fable about Vimalakirti and his encounter with Manjushri and the other bodhisattvas who figure in the story. And hearing the term endarkenment, at first I thought it had something to do with embracing your shadow side and being willing to deal with unpleasant parts of one's own personality and so on. Which is not excluded from that, but it's much, much more than that. So here's a digression that will fold back into it. On December 8th, in a talk I gave, I quoted from a book by Barry Magid called Nothing is Hidden, about koans. And he describes the tension that is found in the stories about Gautama, the child who grew into the man who left his home behind to become the teacher. And he says, there are stories in which the supernatural aspects of the Buddha's life are strongly emphasized, and how uncomfortable it makes him that one of the stories in the Zen tradition has the Buddha be the sort of child who, the moment he has fallen to the earth from his mother's body, jumps up and says, "In the heavens above and the four quarters of the earth, there is none holier than I." So Magid says, was the Buddha that kind of creature, this kind of otherworldly creature? Or was he a regular human being who was able to find new insights into the human mind, a kind of practical psychological healer? Magid makes a point that in the stories, the Buddha leaves his father's palace after having encounters with the conditions that we are all heir to as human beings, as animals, as inhabitants of this planet. Those conditions being old age, sickness, and death. And that he left the palace and is quoted as saying, these factors must ultimately be rejected. And that he then adopted a series of practices, privations, which almost killed him, trying to wipe out all traces of the attachments which would keep him vulnerable to old age, sickness, and death. But those privations, they did not solve the problem for him. And Majid writes finally, yet after all those years of struggle, the essence of the Buddha's realization was that precisely old age, sickness, and death are inescapable. That impermanence is the most fundamental thing, not only about our human lives, but about all of existence. And this, I think, has something to do with the concept of endarkenment that Roshi Sutherland writes about. She writes it with evident pleasure about all the supernatural stuff at the beginning, all the gods and bodhisattvas and arhats crowded together, who hear from the Buddha that that Vimalakirti, this householder who goes to brothels and does other things that enlightened beings are not supposed to do, that he's sick and that someone should go visit him and check up on him. And nobody wants to go because he has a reputation of being like Socrates, for having a skill in asking confounding questions, which makes people back up and reevaluate their own stances on things. And finally, Manjushri, the bodhisattva of Prajna, usually translated as wisdom, volunteers, and then the rest decide that they will go along. And then there's this funny business about, here's Vimalakirti in a 10 by 10 room, and he has to get 10,000 gigantic lion thrones for all of these beings to sit on, and they all fit in the room, and so on. She has a lot of fun with that. More seriously, she says, Prajna should probably be translated not as wisdom, but as bright insight. And she says bright insight is good, but incomplete. And that this bright insight that Manjushri has, he's the guy with the sword that cuts through delusion, that it operates pretty much instantaneously. She says that is not wisdom, because wisdom is more than insight. It needs compassion to be actually whole, and that awakening is not the same as insight, and it's not the same even as wisdom. It is a lifelong process of becoming wiser and becoming, combining insight with compassion. And that it is a lifelong process. It's not an instantaneous, quick reading into things. And she says that to get to that, enlightenment needs endarkenment. She points out, and this is a part that I really respond to, that enlightenment by itself is kind of precarious and brittle. And this is shown by the drama of these bodhisattvas being unwilling to visit Vimalakirti. These bodhisattvas need a lot of special circumstances to protect their purity, and they are anxious about being defiled, she writes. And now I have to find a quote on my phone. It'll take a minute. She says, in modern terms, we might think of the dialogue between Manjushri and Vimalakirti as the crucial meeting between consciousness and between conscious and unconscious, of waking and dreaming life. Perhaps we could say that Manjushri is the flash of insight that moves at lightning speed of synaptic firings in the brain. He has a swift sword that cuts through complications and confusion. Vimalakirti, on the other hand, represents the slower movements of the heart, the idiosyncratic inhale and exhale beat of a bloody muscle. He has a remarkable sickbed upon which he lies down to rest upon the vastness. That's great. We know what it's like when mind and heart are laboring separately from each other. The heaviness of a human heart unenlightened by insight is often what brings people to meditation. Then, when we begin to have certain kinds of meditation experiences, insight will do what it does, which is to run out ahead. That's painful in its own way, because you can see everything so clearly, but you can't, for the time being, feel warmth or tenderness. You have to suffer the discomfort while your heart catches up. If you don't, you become one of those companions of the way who make people wonder how someone who's done so much meditating can be such a jerk. So, what a great book. So she goes on to describe the process of opening to the world in compassion and embracing all those parts of our lives that usually get glossed over or sometimes very violently pushed aside in the effort to be enlightened. And that enlightenment cannot be whole and awakening cannot occur by pushing those things aside. Does that remind you of anything? Does that remind you in any way of all the thousands of talks and lessons offered by Peg and Flint? It sure does me. So I want to talk about tears, and if you would put that picture up on the screen, Rosemary, if you can do that. So this is an illustration from an anatomy online lesson about tears. And I don't know if you can see everything, but just reading down from the top, there's a picture of an eye, and above the eyebrow, and actually anatomically behind the eyebrow, I guess it's on the right side in this view, there are some glands. The lacrimal gland, they are labeled, and then below that there's a pointer going down to the white part of the eye, the conjunctiva, and then over to the right there's a series of other things called out. One is pointing to the cornea, the colored part of the eye that has the iris in it, and then although it's hard to see probably there, but there's a layer of tears that's sitting on top of the cornea and on top of the conjunctiva. And there's the mucus layer, the watery layer, and the oil layer. And then finally, at the bottom of the illustration, there's there's two little arrows pointing up, and they're pointing at kind of rod-shaped structures in the lower eyelid that are called the Meibomian Glands, Meibomian. And the reason that I want to talk about this is because it's to me, it's a kind of second order endarkenment or embrace of endarkenment, to realize that we have a word for this substance that is that's within our eyes. We call them tears, and we say tears are things that we cry when we're sad or have other strong emotions. And we know that they have the function of keeping our eyes lubricated. I will say also that my sister, Trudy Barna Lloyd, who died about 14 months ago, had a number of autoimmune diseases, and one of them was called Sjogren's syndrome, Sjogren's disease, which is a condition in which the tear glands don't produce enough tears, and the salivary glands don't produce enough saliva. And these can be, in certain circumstances, these can be not only very troublesome, but can lead to blindness, can encourage bacterial infections, and so on. So there's a genetic component to Sjogren's disease, and I've been tested, and I do not have a genetic marker for it. But having learned about this from my sister, I learned more about tears. But the main thing is another quote that I want to read, and this is from a piece by the health writer in the New York Times, Jane Brody. She says, "Think of the tear film that coats and lubricates the eye as a 3-layer sandwich. The Meibomian glands in the upper and lower eyelids create an oily outer layer that stabilizes the film. If the film breaks up too quickly, blurry vision is likely to result. Next are 2 sets of lacrimal glands that supply the watery tears. And innermost is the mucin layer, that is a kind of mucus that is found over the body, that attracts water and helps to spread the tear film over the surface of the cornea. Even if the tear supply is adequate, the mucin deficiency can impede wetting of the cornea and damage its surface." So we have a single word for tears. And it turns out that they are produced by an ongoing, there's something I left out also. Both the Meibomian and Lacrimal glands have receptors for the sex hormones, androgen and estrogen, and a decrease in hormone levels likely explains why dry eye problems increase in women at menopause and in men who are treated with anti-androgen therapy for prostate cancer. So again, I keep coming back to this phrase and then breaking off, but the mysterious quality that this thing that we normally pay zero attention to unless there's some problem, these tears that lubricate our eyes and they get expressed in particular ways under emotional circumstances. They are the product of millions of years of evolution. They are factors in our lives that we ignore, but that connect us with every other kind of mammal, not just primates, but all mammals, and many other types of living beings as well. And that they play this role in our being able to apprehend the world for humans, the most important of the senses for most sighted humans, and we literally look through them and pay no attention to them, and we accept that they've been studied by doctors and written about in textbooks and so on. We have no way of knowing about them. So this is to me is just another example of the vast gulf of darkness that we exist in. That all these factors in our lives that it takes work to come to appreciate. And that appreciation leads, I think, to gratitude and to compassion. That it's worth studying what goes on in our bodies, because the physical world, the world we live in, the bodies we have, the incredible journey of each of our cells and each of the molecules that make up the proteins and the fats and the liquids and so on within our bodies, each of them is an incredible story. And we need to be paying attention to that, I think. Or at least this is what I say to myself over and over again. I need to be paying attention to these things. I need to dig in a little more and find out what underlies these brief kind of averaging out sort of activities that I do, and realizing what a mystery is unfolding in every single second. To me, that is a kind of second order endarkenment, something to embrace about this world right here, right now, that we can do, that can point us in the same direction as this wonderful story about Vimalakirti and his encounter with Manjushri. So, yes, thank you, Rosemary. I would be happy to answer any questions I can. I appreciate your patience with this talk. It's so great to be able to look into the screen and see how people are reacting at the same time. So if you have a question, would you raise your hand, and Rosemary can call on people and let me know who's going to speak.
Yeah, if you could use that the reaction raise hand button so I could see everybody. I can't see everybody right now. Thank you.
Okay. I'm guessing that there's no questions for me at this time. I'm not seeing any hands go up.
Well,
So,
I was going to say something as long as I'm unmuted. When I was sitting today, I was doing a body scan, the Analeo body scan, and when I came to water and the eyes, you know, I was contemplating what we're talking about now, and tears, and I was also, in all of the body scan I was doing, I was expanding it to all beings. So I was thinking about animals, and so that was my question. You know, do animals cry?
mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know that, if you're not an expert, but
there are examples of animals expressing emotion and tears being involved. I can't give any exact references right now, but I think orangutans have been known to cry in the same way that humans do. And there are probably others. But even if they don't cry to express emotion, they have the same structure of tears that we do, which again is not just like one thing that pops up. It's this incredibly complex relationship among many body parts. And I think there's a beauty, a grandeur. It's like, I love that phrase that Sutherland writes about Vimalakirti making his bed on the vastness.
Kim? Oh, you want me to spotlight you? Okay, let's. I can do it. No.
No, he needs
Unmute.
unmuting.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
See, John and Bill, it looks like Bill was raising his hand.
So what I really enjoyed about your talk was the description of this miracle, the miracle of the eye. And when I was in high school, I would go to the library to study, and there was a book. This was the University of Chicago Library, and there was an old book of miracles. And my like goal in life was to experience miracles. And I thought that I probably never would. And then I realized, of course, that this life we lead is, you know, and the fact that we're here, and it keeps becoming more and more apparent how the miracles that these saints experienced was nothing like the miracles we get, you know, with our body, with our eye, the fact that we can cry. Those are real miracles. So thank you for that.
I agree. Thank you.
John and Bill?
Thank you. Thank you.
See, called the
Okay,
Weeping
there you
Camel.
go.
Tell her again. And there's a good movie, as you see, called The Weeping Camel. It's made in Mongolia. It was made in Mongolia, and it talks about a camel that refuses to deal with its newborn calf, and all things that they go through to find somebody who could help the camel. And finally, at the end, you see the camel weeping.
Oh, thank you, Bill.
I also wanted to say something. Can you hear
John,
me?
yes.
Yeah, yes, John.
Bill and I used to go see a counselor together, a really lovely man, and he had a dog. And when we'd get settled on the couch, the dog would always be there. And if either of us was emotional, not even crying, but he could sense it, he would come over and lick our hands. You'd tell he was responding to this.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, do dogs have Buddha nature? Do dogs express compassion? Pretty clear. I'd forgotten the Weeping Camel movie. I've seen that. It's been a long time. So I need to check that out again. It's great. It looks like Nelda is the next person.
Okay. Needs to be unmuted. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to let everybody unmute. Sorry about that. Now I think everybody can unmute themselves now. Sorry about that.
Good morning. Thank you. Joel, I loved your talk, and I want to follow up on something that Kim said, but in slightly different words. I had the good fortune recently in the past few weeks to come across a particular meditation. It's a night meditation that is entitled something like Living in Grace. And I don't. This moderator of the meditation, no, I define it, defines grace as unmerited favor. And really brought home the point, as you did this moment, as you did through your talk, that we are surrounded by grace, unmerited favor in the fact that our eyes water, the fact that the breeze blows, and even in those moments of endarkenment, because each of those is a moment to open up to the grace of which we are, this body aside, made. And so she defines grace as the present moment. And so that if we're not living in grace and awareness of the unmerited favor that we are and that we receive, then we're not in the present moment. And so thank you, because I tied your talk to that particular meditation, and it just expanded my gratitude for grace.
Thank you.
Maria?
Hi, as you were talking, Joel, about the eye and all the different parts and how one part works and if another part doesn't and how it affects our vision. And it was kind of making me think of all our parts, you know, and how we sit in meditation and as we do, we kind of notice all the different parts of ourselves and some we're not aware of, and if we don't sit and watch those parts, then they start doing things without our awareness and start causing problems, and then we start to get blurred vision, if you like. We start to see things in an obscured way, in a way that isn't, you know, like we talk about delusions in Buddhism, you know, we kind of start seeing everything from a different angle. And what I love about sitting and about this practice is that it teaches me a lot about wise and unwise attention to those parts, how we can sit and have unwise attention and be critical and self-blaming, or we can sit in compassion and like we do for others, you know, it's so easy to give that compassion to somebody else that we see struggling in the very same way, but it takes a lot more for us to really sit and get settled and to offer that compassion to ourselves, and we can only do that through sitting. And I often think about my foot, you know, I'll go to my foot and I wasn't aware of it until like this second that I've just said that, and how it's doing something I'm not aware of, and how many parts we have that are doing things we're not aware of, and how how important this practice and sitting is, just like going to the opticians and looking at the different parts of the eye and seeing what needs help and what needs support, and how we might not be seeing clearly, how this practice is like a mirror of that. You know, we see clearly, we don't see clearly, and how we need each other to really kind of be able to watch and keep an eye on those parts in a compassionate way, and to let them kind of breathe and come forward, so that we can sit with them in a way that's in company, rather than in the way that we can get into habits of doing, which is getting in knots and self-blame and, oh my goodness, I'm there again. You know, it's kind of giving oxygen to all our parts. I really enjoyed you going through that about the eye, because it really brought all that up for me. So thank you for that, Joel.
Thank you, Maria. And of course, you're a professional. You have very wonderful insight into this, into the possibilities for working with these parts, and you are a dedicated practitioner, so that plays into it. So I'm grateful for what you are adding to this. It's really wonderful.
We have Jess.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me just finish one other thing.
Sorry.
Which is that I think that this is exactly what you just described is not everything, but a great deal of what Joan Sutherland is talking about as endarkenment. That being willingness to turn to everything that is, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's painful, even if we don't want it, and to include those parts of us that make us turn away, that make us not embrace what's in front of us in the same embrace. But that's all endarkenment, I think. So I think I'm going to be spending many years discovering what she's talking about here. I feel like this is a great gift. Thank you, Maria. Jess?
Thank you. Yeah, I ordered the book. I mean, I think it was inspiring to hear the talk, and I think the parts that resonated for me was when you mentioned that there was these, forget the term, but like kind of bodhisattvas that were afraid to see the sick person, and because they're so, their peace or enlightenment is frail in some way, and it's like it can be a lot to kind of see some suffering, and I feel like that could describe me in some ways, you know, for sure. So that part, yeah, I'm letting it move, and yeah, I think it's funny whenever Maria talks, like when we do our daily sitting and stuff, whenever often when she talks, she always stirs something up in me. So kind of what landed there was, you know, I've been like today's sit, I'm doing this Anapanasati Sutta, the 16 steps. And, you know, I think lately there's been a lot of activity in my life, and, you know, my thoughts are just going everywhere, all over. And, you know, one of the steps is, you know, you know, these vain attempts to kind of try to control where these thoughts are going. You know, it's like, you know, letting that go and just having the awareness of the thoughts, and having an awareness of our whole body within, you know, our body and mind. Actually, the awareness brings a calming often, you know, just that in itself. And kind of what you described about just the awareness of the eyes and how much they do, and what Maria was saying about our parts, and when we bring awareness to them, because like I definitely have a strong critical part of me, and that critic I can totally blend with, you know, where I'm not even aware that is anyway, so this awareness, but when I'm just noticing all that's happening, that kind of, I think that term living in grace, that just sort of awareness of all this unmerited things that are happening, there is this sort of, it's a strange sense of calm that comes over me. And it's, you know, I guess it's terrifying. The sea of suffering, you know, is terrifying in one sense, but then also to rest in it is, I could see that as something that's very calming. So anyways, there's stuff stirring in there, and thank you all.
I see Jean's hand up.
Sorry, I asked Rosemary how to raise my hand officially. That's why I put my hand up, because I had no idea how to use the yellow hand. So thank you, Joel, for your talk. And I struggled today for something a friend from childhood said before I started the meditation, some text that triggered me fully into fight and flight. And I was there. And Maria, I tried very hard to do let go or you'll be dragged. It didn't work for me. Of course, it wasn't my thing at that time. So I brought my ventral energy into fight and flight. And I just held. I'm not asking you to go away. I'm not asking it. It evokes so much stuff because old friends can do that. They know you for so long. But I held that, and like Jess was saying, you know, it was a struggle and it didn't go away. It didn't get better. Instead, it accelerated more. But the holding of it with compassion gave it ground to say, it's okay. You're here, I see you. You don't have to resolve this. You don't have to answer this. I just see you. I just hear you. I'm here. I care. I care deeply for this pain. And for some reason, I don't know, maybe just I was misconstruing your words, but it held it. You know, it didn't release the suffering. It didn't go away, but it held it. It didn't trigger more narratives and stories about how bad I am or how bad you are or how bad everyone is that comes into that same periphery. It just held it. And I don't know, for some reason, Joel, I don't know what part, but your talk kind of crystallized that holding. That just, it's okay just to hold it wherever it is, whatever's coming up. Doesn't have to resolve.
How long would you say that you have been on the path? How long have you been meditating?
Maybe 3 years. Regular meditation, like everyday practice, maybe.
And during that time, how long has it been since you've been able to do what you just described, to meet a really difficult emotion with compassion and let it be what it has to be, without trying to change it? Have you?
I don't know, it's like Nelda's grace. It's like Nelda's grace, Joel. It comes in waves. Sometimes I can be completely held in either shutdown or fight, flight. And then it feels like grace will come unexpectedly and hold me up. But I don't know whether it's directly related to being in breath or, you know, body, or like I could have the candle in the middle of the night and wake up and be completely triggered, and it feels like just I'm held. So I don't know. I haven't been able to put it to one thing, but I know that there are moments I'm not held and there are moments I'm held and there are moments I'll spin. I don't know if anything I said makes sense, but
Certainly, certainly. And the reason I'm asking that is because I think that, the Buddha talked about skillful means. And I don't think there's anything in the Buddha's original teachings about that particular process that you just described. Meeting a fear, meeting a very strong emotion, and being cast into the physical reaction that is this fight and flight thing that comes from a part of our brain that operates much faster and much stronger than our discursive mind, and the mind in which we can hold a broader view and so on. And yet you have developed this skill out of your practice. And I just want to say that is skillful means. And that's something that I've heard about from Peg and Flint and other teachers, and learned so much about from Laurie and Todd and others with Appamada, Maria, Rosemary, Jess, Claudine, Nancy. And I'm going to, pardon me for leaving other people out. Nelda, Kim, just people that I get to talk to recently, or fairly regularly. And I learned so much about that. And I'm so grateful that you shared that. And I just want to say, you have pointed to some skillful means that can benefit everybody. Thank you. I'm scanning to see if anybody else has a hand up. Dan, I saw that you had your virtual hand up before. I just want to say I haven't had a chance to talk to you before, and I want to say thank you for joining today. I hope it was something you enjoyed and got something from.
Thank you. This was unexpected for me to be here, and the talk is so appropriate that I'm kind of in shock slightly, because it's I've been spending a lot of time on a kind of path where the attention was redirected away from these things. And I started to become aware of the impact of that, especially with recently being in more social situations. And at first, I had a question about, if you're looking at what's coming up, how to not go into it too much and create more, but the sharing that just took place was very clear. And
in our daily chants that we say on weekdays, we take 3 refuges: Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And the last one's really important. So I hope that you can connect more with Appamada, and to know the incredible resource that the people that you can see on the screen here are for support. I know it so intimately, and you're not alone.
I can feel it. It's amazing. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, Dan.
So I want to say one more thank you, and that is to Laura Furman. I don't know if you can see her name on your screen. That's my wife. We celebrated our 41st wedding anniversary last week, and she saved my bacon this morning. She took pictures of the pages in the book that I wanted to quote from and got them to me. So I woke her up to do that. So thank you, Laura. Thank you. And so far as I know, this is the first time Laura has ever listen to one of my talks in real time. It's a thrill for me.